Right. So today we're going deep, really deep into some pretty intense material. And it's going to be a wild ride, I think.
I think so, too.
We are cracking open the glossary of the Order of Nine Angles.
The ONA.
The ONA.
Yeah.
And for our listeners who might not be familiar, that's the group with the reputation for being, well, let's just say a little outside the mainstream.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, maybe more than a little, huh?
Yeah.
So I'm excited to have you here to help us decode this stuff.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Because their terminology is really like a secret code.
It is.
It gives us this peek into the worldview, which is pretty unique and sometimes...
a little unsettling.
Yeah, unsettling is a good word.
Yeah.
So before we jump into the glossary itself, can you give us just a quick rundown, like what is the ONA all about?
So in a nutshell, the ONA is an esoteric group.
Okay.
Which basically means they're all about hidden knowledge and practices, and they're often linked to this thing called the left-hand path, which emphasizes personal growth through challenging, conventional beliefs, pushing your own boundaries.
Gotcha.
But honestly, even within those esoteric circles, they stand out as being pretty intense and controversial.
But not your average, like, meditation group.
Definitely not.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
So that's where this glossary comes in.
Exactly.
It's like a decoder ring for understanding their perspective.
It is. It is.
So I'm ready to decode.
Right.
What's the first term?
Let's start with the abyss.
The abyss, okay.
Which is a core concept.
Okay.
It represents a kind of threshold, between the world we know and
something else.
Something beyond, yeah.
So we're not talking about a literal abyss, right?
No.
Like a giant hole in the ground?
Not a physical abyss, no.
Okay.
More of a symbolic representation. They believe there's this realm they call the acausal. Which exists outside our normal understanding of time and space.
So like a hidden dimension, like a reality behind the reality.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's not just an empty space or anything.
Right.
They believe it's teeming with, energies and entities and possibilities that operate by different laws.
So they're saying there's this whole other reality out there influencing our world.
Mm-hmm.
And the abyss is like the key to access it.
That's the idea.
Okay. My brain is starting to bend a little bit here.
It's a lot to take in.
So how do they try to access it?
Well, that's where we get to another term.
Okay.
The star game.
The star game.
Yeah, they describe it as this complex system, like a board game or a map that helps them navigate this a causal realm.
So hold on. Are they saying they can actually like influence events with this star game?
That's what they believe.
How does that even work?
Well, they believe that by mastering the star game, it cultivates what they call acausal thinking.
Causal thinking.
Yeah, it's about shifting your perspective to see beyond the limits of linear time, cause and effect, and they claim that this can lead to insights and abilities that allow you to actually influence events in both realms.
Wow.
Causal and acausal.
Five-dimensional magic.
They call it five-dimensional magic.
This is getting seriously mind-blowing.
It's a lot, yeah.
All right, so...
But what's fascinating is how this all ties into their concept of eons.
Okay, break down eons for me.
So the ONA believes that history is shaped by these vast cycles of energy that they call eons.
Eons.
And each eon has its own distinct character, influencing cultures, beliefs, even the course of civilizations.
So kind of like astrological ages, but on a much grander scale?
You could see it that way.
Okay.
They believe we're currently in a transition period between eons.
Oh, interesting.
And they call themselves eonics, meaning they see themselves as actively working to usher in a new aeon.
Wow, that's ambitious.
It is.
So they're not just passively observing these cycles. They're trying to actively influence them.
Exactly.
And how do they do that?
Well, that's where their concept of nexions comes into play.
Nexions, I think.
They believe that certain individuals or groups or even events can act as focal points where those acausal energies can kind of break through and influence our world.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, an eon is like this powerful force influencing the world.
Yeah.
And a nexion is like a doorway for that force to operate through.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
And they believe that by understanding these energies and mastering that star game, they can potentially act as nexions themselves, shaping the course of this new aeon.
Okay, I can already see how this worldview could lead them down some pretty intense paths.
Yeah, it can.
But all this talk of the acausal and eon seems very theoretical to me.
Yeah.
How does it actually translate into their practices?
Well, that's where their emphasis on the dark arts comes in.
Dark arts, okay.
It's their umbrella term for a set of skills and practices aimed at personal and spiritual development.
Right.
But also at interacting with and influencing that causal realm.
So it's not just about understanding these concepts intellectually.
Yeah.
It's about putting them into practice.
Exactly.
Right.
They believe that real knowledge comes through experience.
Right.
And encourage their followers to actually engage in practices that
push their limits.
Push their limits, challenge conventional morality.
That's where it starts to get a little unsettling, right?
It can.
So can you give us some examples of what these dark arts might actually entail?
Well, one key concept is dark empathy.
Dark empathy.
Which involves developing an understanding of the causal nature of beings, including yourself.
Okay.
But it goes beyond just understanding.
Right.
They believe dark empathy can be used to influence and manipulate others, even to tap into their energy.
So we're talking about some pretty intense stuff here.
We are.
Not your typical self-help techniques.
Definitely not.
Okay, so this kind of ties into that fundamental distinction they make.
Yeah.
Between the mundane and the sinister.
Exactly.
I saw those terms in the glossary. What's the difference?
So they use mundane to describe people who are kind of trapped,
Okay.
in conventional ways of thinking.
Right.
Those who accept the world as it's presented without questioning. They believe these people are limited by what they call causal abstractions.
Causal abstractions.
Which are basically just simplistic understandings of reality.
So mundane folks are kind of like sheep, just following the herd.
Kind of, yeah, you get the idea.
Okay.
In contrast, they see the sinister path as a way of breaking free from those limitations.
Okay.
Embracing the complexities of the acausal.
Right.
And developing a more nuanced understanding of reality.
So the sinister path is about questioning everything.
Yeah.
Challenging norms, basically going against the grain.
A big part of it, yeah. And this leads us to another key term, the Sinister Code.
The Sinister Code.
Which outlines a set of principles that guides their actions, defines their ethical framework.
This code sounds intriguing. Can you give us a glimpse?
Well, one of the most striking elements is this emphasis on loyalty to one's own kind.
Okay.
Those who follow the sinister path.
Right.
And they believe that showing any form of submission or deference to the mundane is dishonorable.
Wow.
It's a radical rejection of conventional morality.
So there's a definite element of elitism here.
There is.
Even hostility towards those who don't share their worldview.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're starting to see how this unique terminology reflects
a
pretty intense and potentially dangerous worldview.
It can be.
And I can't imagine we can talk about the ONA without addressing what I think are the terms that get the most attention.
Yeah.
Satan and Satanism.
Of course.
So help us understand.
It's important to understand that their perspective on these terms is quite different from the typical Judeo-Christian understanding.
So we're not talking about devil worship.
Not in the traditional sense, no.
Okay, good to know.
They see Satan as an acausal entity.
Okay.
A symbol of rebellion against limitations and a representation of the power that can be accessed through embracing the sinister.
So more of a metaphorical figure than a literal being.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they define Satanism as a specific left-hand path. A way of pursuing personal transformation and evolution through those esoteric arts.
So I'm sensing a pattern here. They seem to take these existing concepts.
They do.
And redefine them to fit their worldview.
Exactly. They reinterpret traditional ideas and symbols to suit their own purposes.
Makes sense. So to really understand their approach, we need to explore another key term.
Yeah.
The Round-Wytha tradition.
The Round-Wytha tradition.
What's that all about?
So this is where things get a little more nuanced. Okay.
The Round-Wytha tradition refers to a female-centric path.
Wait, a female-centric path?
Yes.
Within a group that seems to glorify strength and transgression.
It might seem contradictory.
It does.
But the ONA actually recognizes and values what they call mulibral qualities.
Mulibral.
Yeah, things like empathy, intuition, cunning.
Okay.
Kind of a veiled strength.
Interesting.
They believe these qualities have been suppressed in modern society, particularly by what they call the Magian ethos.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
So they're not just about brute force.
No.
There's a recognition of these more subtle aspects of power.
Absolutely. They believe true power comes from a balance of masculine and feminine energy.
Right.
And they see this Roundwatha tradition as crucial for achieving that balance.
So the Roundwatha tradition is really interesting. It adds another layer of complexity to understanding this group.
For sure.
It sounds like they have a very specific vision for how the world should be.
They do. Structured how individuals should interact.
Yeah, you're picking up on something important.
Okay.
Their worldview isn't just about abstract concepts.
Right.
It's about creating a new way of life.
Okay.
And to understand that, we need to look at two more key terms.
All right, hit me.
Vindex and the Magian.
Vindex and the Magian. Okay, I'm ready for the next layer of the onion.
All right, so Vindex is their term for a person, male or female, who embodies this new way of life. A way of life based on personal honor, tribalism, a rejection of the modern nation state. And they believe that Vindex will arise to challenge and ultimately overthrow the forces they associate with the Magian.
So Vindex is like their ideal revolutionary figure.
You could see it that way.
All right.
Someone who will lead the charge against the established order.
Okay, and who or what is this Magian they're so against?
So the Magian represents everything they oppose. It's their term for the dominant force in the modern world, which they see as based on deception, control, and the suppression of individual freedom.
So think of it as a symbol for the forces of conformity.
Yes.
Materialism, centralized power.
Exactly.
That they believe are corrupting humanity.
That's the idea.
So it sounds like the Magian encompasses things like...
It does.
Organized religion, the modern nation state.
Yes.
Maybe even aspects of capitalism and consumerism.
You're on the right track.
Wow, this is all incredibly complex and a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
I can understand that.
Okay, I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
We have, but we've laid a good foundation for understanding their core concepts.
Yeah, and in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how these ideas translate into their actual practices and their vision for the future.
Exactly.
I am ready for more.
You're right. Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into this glossary of the Order of Nine Angles.
Yeah, we left off talking about
Vindex
and the Magian. And it's like they see this cosmic battle brewing between those two forces.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So how does that all fit into their idea of the sinister dialectic?
So they believe that clash is a crucial part of what they call the sinister dialectic, which is a process of destruction and creation that drives both personal and societal evolution.
Okay, remind me how the sinister dialectic works again.
Sure, it's their version of a cosmic balancing act.
Right.
They believe that to create something new, you first have to dismantle the old.
Okay.
So they see conflict and even destruction as necessary catalysts for change.
That's a pretty radical perspective.
It is.
It definitely challenges like our usual assumptions about progress and how change happens.
Yeah.
So how do they envision this new way of life emerging from the ashes of the Magian?
One key aspect is their emphasis on tribalism.
Okay.
They believe the modern nation state is a tool of the Magian, designed to suppress individual freedom and enforce conformity.
So they're advocating for a return to smaller, more independent communities.
Exactly. They believe that true freedom and authenticity can only flourish within these smaller, self-governing groups, bound by shared values and a strong sense of personal honor. It's
like a rejection of globalization.
It is.
And these big centralized power structures in favor of something more localized, decentralized.
Yes.
This idea of tribalism is...
it's a bit controversial.
Yeah. It's intriguing.
Yeah.
But it also raises some concerns.
For sure.
Like, wouldn't it lead to isolationism?
Yeah.
And potentially even conflict between those different groups?
Those are valid concerns.
Yeah.
And the ONA, they don't shy away from the possibility of conflict.
Right.
In fact, they see it as an inevitable part of this whole process of change.
That's a bit unsettling, to be honest.
It can be.
Are they actually advocating for violence?
It's not quite that simple. They don't necessarily glorify violence.
Right.
But they do see it as a potential tool, a force of nature that can be harnessed to break down those old structures and create space for something new.
So it's more about Acknowledging that potential for conflict.
Yes.
In any process of radical change.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about their beliefs.
Sure.
But how do these ideas actually translate into action? Like, what do they actually do?
Well, they place a strong emphasis on what they call practical deeds.
Practical deeds.
Yeah, they believe that true transformation requires more than just, reading books and attending rituals. It demands real-world experience, a willingness to take risks and push those boundaries.
So it's about putting those theories into practice.
Exactly.
Walking the walk, so to speak.
Yes, precisely.
Great.
And they encourage a lot of individual initiative. They don't offer a rigid blueprint for achieving those goals.
Right.
They kind of just provide a framework, a set of principles, and then encourage their followers to find their own ways to apply them.
That's both empowering and potentially dangerous.
It is.
Yeah, it gives individuals a lot of autonomy.
Right.
But it also leaves room for misinterpretation.
Yeah.
Potentially harmful actions.
That's true. And it's important to acknowledge that, the ONA has been associated with some very disturbing activities. Yeah. But it's also important to remember that the ONA isn't a monolithic organization with a central command structure. Okay. It's more of a network, a loose collection of individuals and groups who share this set of beliefs.
So there's a lot of variation within the ONA.
Yes.
Not everyone is necessarily engaging in the same activities.
Exactly. There's a spectrum of involvement and interpretation.
Okay.
Some might focus on studying personal development,
right,
while others might be more actively involved in trying to bring about societal change,
right,
even through controversial or extreme means.
That makes sense. It's important to avoid making generalizations.
Yes.
About such a diverse group.
Right.
Now, you mentioned that they encourage experimentation and risk-taking.
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples of what that might look like in practice?
Well, one interesting example is their concept of insight roles.
Insight roles?
Yeah, they encourage their followers to take on roles in society.
Okay.
That might seem contradictory to their beliefs.
Yeah.
Even roles within institutions they see as part of the Magian.
Wait, so they might actually infiltrate groups they oppose?
They might.
Why would they do that?
So they believe that change can be more effectively brought about from within.
Interesting.
So they might join a political party, a religious organization, even work in the media, or the military, not to support those institutions, but to gain influence and subtly undermine them from the inside.
So it's like a form of undercover activism.
You could see it that way.
Wow.
It's about playing the long game, using strategic thinking, and manipulation to chip away at the system from within.
It sounds like something out of a spy novel.
It does, a little bit.
This infiltration strategy is fascinating.
It is.
But also a little unsettling.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder who you can really trust.
Yeah, that's part of what makes the ONA so intriguing and so controversial.
So it's not just about these abstract concepts, this esoteric knowledge.
No.
They're actively trying to shape the world according to their vision.
Absolutely. And they're not afraid to use unconventional and sometimes even ethically questionable methods.
Okay, so we've talked about their more subtle tactics.
Right.
Do they ever engage in more overt forms of action?
They do. They advocate for forming groups, or what they call gangs.
Gangs?
Yeah, to directly challenge societal norms and create disruption.
So they're not just about working behind the scenes.
No.
They're willing to get their hands dirty.
You could say that, yeah.
So how does that work?
They believe that pushing those boundaries, and even creating chaos, can weaken the hold of the Magian and accelerate the process of change.
This is all incredibly complex.
It is.
And it's clear that the ONA is not a group that can be easily categorized or understood.
Definitely not. Their philosophy is this blend of esotericism, radical individualism, rejection of conventional morality.
Yeah.
It's challenging. It's potentially dangerous. But it's also undeniably fascinating.
So where does magic fit into all of this, their ideas about magic and the occult?
That's a great question.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
All right.
We'll delve into their unique approach to magic and esoteric practices.
Okay.
And try to grapple with the ethical implications of their worldview.
Sounds intense. I'm ready to dive in.
Oh.
Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into the Order of Nine Angles.
Yes.
We've explored their complex worldview, their ideas about eons and the Magian.
Yes.
And even those strategies for bringing about change. It's been a wild ride.
It has.
And now
we get to the good stuff.
The good stuff. I like that.
Yeah.
Their perspective on magic and the occult.
Yeah.
We can't talk about the ONA without addressing their magical system.
Right.
They call it dark sorcery, right?
They do, yes.
But their approach is pretty different from what you might find.
It is.
In more traditional magical traditions.
Exactly.
It's not about, casting spells to get what you want or summoning spirits for guidance or anything like that.
Not in the traditional sense.
So what is it about?
So they see magic as a means of interacting with and manipulating.
Okay.
That acausal realm, remember?
Yes, that hidden dimension we talked about.
Exactly. They believe it underlies and influences our physical reality.
Right.
And they see magic as a way to tap into that power.
So it's about using magic to influence events in the real world.
Yes, but it goes deeper than that. They also see magic as a tool for personal transformation, for pushing your own boundaries, exploring the depths of your own being.
Okay, so that's starting to sound a bit more like traditional magic. What are some of the specific practices they engage in?
Well, their system is pretty complex, multi-layered.
Okay.
It does include elements of ceremonial magic.
Okay.
But they also have more unconventional techniques.
All right.
And they make a distinction between internal and external magic.
Internal and external?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me more.
So internal magic focuses on personal transformation, developing your character abilities.
Right.
It involves practices like meditation, visualization, even engaging in those challenging or transgressive experiences to break down your psychological barriers,
So it's like using magic to hack your own mind.
Kind of, yeah.
Wow, that's intense.
It's about pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, confronting your own shadow side.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this ties into their overall philosophy.
Yeah, it does.
What about external magic? What does that involve?
So external magic is more about influencing the world around you.
Okay. Directing
those causal energies towards specific goals.
Right.
So they might use rituals, symbols, or other techniques to,
right.
influence people, manipulate events, even bring about large-scale societal change.
So it's about shaping the world according to your will.
In a way, yeah, but remember, their worldview is all about balance.
Right.
It's about the interplay of light and darkness, creation and destruction. So they believe that magic can be used for both, constructive and destructive purposes.
Right.
And they kind of leave it up to the individual
to decide how to wield that power. That's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
What kind of ethical guidelines do they offer?
Right. Well, their ethical framework is based on that Sinister Code.
Right.
It emphasizes, loyalty, honor, strength, willingness to defend yourself and your own. But they don't really give a lot of specific rules for using magic.
So it's kind of a use your best judgment approach.
Kind of, yeah.
Which seems a bit risky, considering
it can be
potential for harm.
They believe that true strength lies in taking responsibility for your own actions.
Okay.
Making your own choices, facing the consequences.
So the world is a testing ground, basically.
They see the world as a testing ground.
Right.
Where individuals can experiment, push those boundaries.
Right.
And ultimately forge their own destinies.
This all sounds very individualistic.
It is.
And honestly, a bit dangerous.
It can be, yeah.
So what's to stop someone from abusing that power?
That's a question they grapple with, too.
Right.
They acknowledge that their path is not for everyone.
Right.
It requires a certain type of individual, someone with a strong will, a clear sense of purpose, a willingness to face the consequences.
So it's a path for the strong, the ruthless.
You could say that's
those who aren't afraid to embrace the darkness.
They believe that true power comes from embracing the totality of human nature, both the light and the dark. And they see the modern world as a place where the dark has been suppressed, demonized. And they believe that suppression has led to weakness, decadence.
So they're trying to restore balance, bring the darkness back into the light.
In a way, yes.
Okay, this whole deep dive has been a real mind bender.
It has.
We've only scratched the surface of this complex and controversial worldview.
Right.
But I think we've given our listeners a good glimpse into what makes the ONA so unique and potentially dangerous.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
I think the ONA is a reminder that there are always those alternative perspectives out there.
Right.
There are always those who challenge the status quo and seek to create their own paths. And whether we agree with them or not, their existence forces us to confront the complexities of, human nature and this ever-evolving landscape of belief and practice in the world.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the ONA,
yes,
what's the one key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the ONA is not just this abstract philosophy.
Right.
It's a living tradition with real-world implications.
Right.
Their ideas are out there, they're circulating, they're influencing people.
Yeah.
And it's up to each of us to be aware of these ideas, to critically evaluate them, and to decide for ourselves how we want to respond.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
It is.
And understanding the ONA, even if we find their worldview disturbing,
right,
it gives us a better understanding of the forces at play in the world around us.
It does.
So, listener, that concludes our deep dive into the glossary of the Order of Nine Angles.
Yes.
We encourage you to continue exploring these ideas, to do your own research, to form your own conclusions. Just remember to
keep a critical eye.
Keep a critical eye. Yeah. And maybe a strong stomach.
Maybe.
As you venture further down this rabbit hole.
It's a deep one.
It is. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep diving deep.